Okay, see you.
Bye.
Bye. The session is being recorded. Please switch off your video and mute your microphone. Write your student number in the chat. If you have queries for the next week, I'm out of office, so you have to send it to CT in TAT or contact your e-tutor directly. I think the e-tutors in this week before the exam, they're more or less supposed to be on duty every day. So they should answer you within uh, an hour after you've asked the question. If there's a feedback form, you can fill it in, or Jacques will email you a feedback form to fill in after the semester. And as I've said, the meeting is being recorded. Let me just make sure it's being recorded. Yeah, it is being recorded. The outcomes for this workshop, I want to have to remind you of the support offered by UNISA. Then we are going to look at the details of reading a paper. And then when we are answering a paper, we are going to look at the construction of a paragraph, introductions, and a conclusion. Now, the support offered by UNISA is really quite intense. I think it's because everybody is worried about the influence of the lockdown on your studies. So there are far more tutorial letters than usual. I looked at all the tutorial letters for ENG1501 that I have access to. What is quite important, because they don't seem to have, they seem, according to the list they've put out, nothing has been removed for the exam. So according to that list, you have to study everything that has been prescribed. All the poetry, all the short stories, and the novel. Now, what bothers me is that if they give you an option in the exam, because on the video, the podcasts that are available on the live stream library, they speak about 2 questions. I don't know whether you get a choice or whether they give you 2 questions with no options to uh, so, and that is something that you need to ask your e-tutor about, because the e-tutor has a direct line to the lecturer. The important thing is not that you know how to choose, because you may feel that you can do the poem because the poem is supplied in the exam. But there are all kinds of um, details that one needs to take into account if you get options in an exam. And those you need to be aware of. So it's important to make sure that you know how the exam paper is actually set out. The next thing is the availability of the e-tutors. From what I've seen, the e-tutors will be expected to be on duty this coming week when you are writing your exam all the time. And then there is a special webinar about the exam, how to write the exam and upload. There is information on your on your announcement page. Sorry, I need to organize something on this side quickly. There, now I can see your chats all the time. So, and here is the link that will give you admission to the webinar tomorrow between 9 and 11. When they post the link to the recording, because that's usually posted quite soon, I will post it to Teams so that you can access the recording if you don't have time to watch it tomorrow morning. Then I want to bring to your attention the fact that UNISA offers career counseling, because if you have to select modules for next year, that selection will affect either your postgraduate studies or your final year at your degree. And most of you are currently working towards a degree in education, and if you want to do high school or a certain phase, you have to make sure that you opt for the correct modules. And on the UNISA site, on the My UNISA site, if you look under student support and regions, here is counseling and career development, where you can ask them specific questions about how the modules that you have chosen, how that will affect your studies further. And if you look under that same tab that I opened now, you can also find out more about financial support available for next year. But let's now have a look at the exam. When we read an exam paper, we need to be a very conscious reader. That would imply that we distinguish between instructions, keywords, the scaffolding afforded by the paper. And what I'm saying now is not only relevant for the ENG1501, it is also available or applicable to all your other modules. Now, when we look at the instructions, this is the theory behind instructions. I don't know whether you've done this in your educational studies, but it is based on Bloom's taxonomy. First of all, we know something. For instance, you know the story of small things. Then we understand it. And at the next level, we can apply the techniques and themes and concepts we've learned about literary analysis. We can apply that to the knowledge and comprehension that we have. And therefore, we can write an essay in which we analyze certain ideas. We can also put the ideas together to form a new insight. And at the end, we can evaluate whether the book has been successful or not. So And if you look at the image at the bottom, each of these steps have different instructions. And what is important is that that's why you need to read the instructions, because the cognitive skill being tested has to do with, if you translate, you need to understand, comprehend something to translate it. If you translate metaphor into your mother tongue, that's fine, but they wanted you to apply it. And that is a different one. So I took a few examples of instruction verbs and see how they affect our reading of the instruction. Identify two metaphors in stanza 3. So you have your poem and you need to be able to identify two metaphors, which is different from discuss the importance of the two metaphors in stanza 3. Because in a discussion, we have different points of view. So discuss will be something else than identify. Explain brings a whole new and another nuance to how we are going to answer the question. Explain the significance of the irony in the final two lines. So these instructions, these verbs, it's important that you know exactly what the instruction requires of you in the answer. Then the next thing that we need to look at is we need to look at, when we are reading a paper, at the key words. And for that, here is a poem, and it's a lovely poem. We've spoken shortly about it. Briefly, it is about, you can get the copy if you have access to the copy. You can have the copy in your book. By holding my mirror out of the window, I see clear to the end of the passage. There's a person down there, a prisoner polishing a door handle. In the mirror, I see him, see my face in the mirror. I see the fingertips of his free hand bunched together, as if to make an object the size of a badge, which travels up to his forehead, the place of an imaginary cap. This means a warder. Two fingers are extended in a V and wiggle like two antennae. He's being watched. A finger of his free hand makes a watch hand's arc on the wrist of his polishing arm, without disrupting the slow, slow rhythm of his work. Later, maybe later we can speak. Hey, wat maak jy daar? A voice from around the corner. No, just polishing, boss. He turns his back to me. Now watch his free hand, the talkative one, slips quietly behind. Strength, brother, it says, in my mirror, a black fist. Listen, I didn't write quietly wrong when I cut and paste. And that's what happened. So that is the poem. Let's now look at the questions set on the poem. The prisoners use a type of sign language to communicate with one another. Find the 4 signs that they use and explain what each means. Do you see the keyword? And here we have the instruction and instruction again. In this case, find is like identify and then explain. This next one is a kind of open question. These people are in a prison. Why aren't they allowed to speak to one another? Or at least 2 prisoners allowed to speak to each other. You may use a bit of your imagination, but it can't go too far. Whatever the reason is, something must be said about a prison being about control. And then number 3, consider the image of the black fist in the final line of the poem. Why? And that is again on the level of explain. Why is this particular image striking and significant? Just as part of the revision, Melissa, you can unmute yourself. Can you answer that last question, number 3? Melissa, you may can you not unmute yourself? Oh, maybe I... Can you now unmute yourself? Now, see if you can unmute yourself now. Still not. Oh, it has just C2. There you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear
okay. For the first time, I'm actually in my kitchen busy cooking, so you're going to hear all sorts of other sounds because I wasn't expecting this call.
So, never mind.
Okay, so just repeat the question that I meant to answer because I can't see it now anymore.
Okay, the question is, these are 2 guys in the poem that I read. It's about 2 guys in the prison, and they use sign language to communicate. And it ends finally with the guy making a black fist where the prisoner can't see it. So what is the significance of that specific image that that's being used?
I think the image of the black fist at the end was to show the power. I mean, even though they're in a situation where they are under the control of the water, the black fist indicates the hope of someday they will rise up. Is how I
Yes.
look at that.
And then the black fist is the icon for black power. Did you know that?
Yes.
Okay. In an answer like that, you will have to use the word icon and then to indicate that it's universal.
Okay.
Okay. Melissa, did you guys get a message about today's lesson?
I got just a note that came through, funny enough, on my cell phone via Teams. I didn't even know that my Teams was active on my cell phone, to say the class will start at 5:30, and that was I think at about 4:45. And then I
Okay.
thought, well, maybe that means for Monday. And then when I got home, then I thought, oh, maybe it's actually today. So that's why I went on. And I'm glad I did.
Didn't you get an email?
No, there wasn't an email that came through. Not that I received.
No, but if you didn't receive it, nobody received it.
Yeah.
I'll ask them tomorrow to send out an email for Monday, because English 1501 is really a module with which the students struggle. So I had all kinds of other plans for Monday night, but
Okay.
I'll
Is the
do
Monday
this.
class still going ahead? Is the Monday class still going ahead?
I'll organize it, because with the current system, it doesn't matter if I have to repeat a class. I'm at home. I don't use data more. It's not a problem. It's not
Okay.
like going down.
I got the sense that the participants in the last couple of meetings were really benefiting from the classes. So that will be great if they don't have to lose out.
Yes, because the problem is I have quite a lot of experience with feedback from the students, and later on we're going to pay attention to the introduction and to the conclusion. And one of the major aims of this module is to teach you the conventions of writing a literary essay. So you really have to tick the boxes.
Yeah, I must say I did substantially worse in my third assignment than in my other two. So I will look forward to that discussion as well, because obviously there was something that I did that just wasn't perfect or good enough.
I'm going on holiday on Tuesday morning for a week.
Oh,
So
nice.
I'm feeling very charitable towards the universe. If you want to, you can send me your assignment with the feedback, and I might be able to give you pointers for the exam.
Okay, I will really appreciate that, because
Yes.
I've already, there's already been slightly different input from the lecturers and from the marker. So if you can maybe just give me some pointers. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought my essay was great, but it obviously wasn't. So
Shame. What did you get?
no, I mean, I think I still did well. I think I still did well, but I did very well in the other two. So it was it was close on a 20% drop. So
Wow.
I'm
Yes.
still well within passing. So nothing to complain about.
Melissa, that question, remember you had a bit of verbal diarrhea with a short story, remember?
Yes. Yes. And that one they never seem to mark down That one I still did quite well in. And in fact, do you recall that I said at the time that I wasn't happy with with what they clearly viewed to be the theme? And so I went on my own tangent with the theme, and that was the one question that they really marked me down in. But in the rest, despite the length, I mean, it was definitely longer than 15 lines, all of them.
Yeah.
I still did very well.
Okay, now then, that way one also learns a bit, because there's a difference between expanding on an argument and really going off on a tangent.
Yeah, and if I look at the tutorial letters that came out, they gave suggested responses, and their responses also weren't 10 to 15 lines. They were also quite a bit longer, some of them.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I kind of got the impression that maybe as long as one was still on topic and not just waffling on, yeah, but I mean, I definitely got feedback in my essay that my paragraphs were too long. So there I can probably learn again.
Okay, if I can give you a tip, I suppose I have spoken to you about it, but the moment you start taking your verbs and change them into nouns, you condense the sentence.
Just remind me, you have said that before, but can you give me an example?
Let's take one of this. If you look at this first question that I had here, if you change communicate to communication, communication between prisoners used to be a type of sign language.
Okay. Yeah, I see.
And the sentence already is well structured, and that really makes a difference to how things are done.
Yeah.
And then I didn't want to change the wording of because this was cut and paste from your activity page. But for instance, make sure that you need every single adjective, because particular doesn't add anything to the meaning.
Yeah. So that can get excluded when one's writing your own essay.
When you, yes, when you, but this is done after you've written it. Don't start, I'll speak about it when I speak about the draft, but while you are writing, a certain part of your brain is working. And that if that argumentative part of your brain, the part of your brain with which you construct an argument, if that's working, don't interrupt it with detail. It is afterwards that you look, can't I change this verb into a noun?
Okay.
So the editing is done afterwards.
Okay. Well, we do have 8 hours, so hopefully, I mean, it normally takes me 3 weeks to write an essay, so hopefully 8 hours is going to be enough.
Yeah, but yes, I think it would be a case of if you can mark important bits in your in small things. If you have a paper copy.
Yeah. Yes, I was actually thinking of going through the book over the weekend and then highlighting the different themes in different colors.
Yes.
Because there are only 6 themes, and I mean, it will mean I need to go and make a little shop to get stickers, but just so that one can know this is now the love section, these sections deal with friendship or whatever. And then I think that'll make it so much easier on the day to
find
it.
Because I see that they expect you to have a bibliography or a reference list at the end of your essay.
Yes, so now I've already actually spent the whole morning, because that takes time. I spent the whole morning today setting that up so that I can just take out the bits that are going to make, that I'm going to be able to use. That's something they suggested on their video, that one actually already pre-plans that. But in a way, the fact that we're writing the exam the way we are, it's a bit of a pity, because it doesn't really prepare us for how exams will ever be if they are, you know, back to venue-based. So
Yes.
in a way, I
And
feel a little bit out of practice with writing that kind of exam.
it's a bit like riding a bicycle. You struggle a bit and then you get into the habit again.
I hope so.
Then the thing that I see across, and I really work about, I think I work with at least about 10 modules as part of this kind of workshop, is
Okay.
that UNISA really believes in the scaffolding. But now what happens with weaker or immature students? And immature, I don't mean with emotional intelligence, but students who are not so au fait with academic skills. They don't read everything. So
Okay.
here is a quote from the short story. Here are the questions, and the questions actually provide a lot of information that will help you to answer the question. But in order to find the information, you need to read every single word. I explained to another class these guidelines, or the scaffolding, is a bit like this ladder. I don't know whether you can see it, but
Yeah.
if the answer is over there, this is the way that you will get there. But that means that you have to read everything. And if you look at it here, they speak about personification in the first sentence. And remember, they have the structure that you first explain the literary device being used. So you need to say, but in this kind of exam, you can copy it from the back of your study guide. If you use the study guide, remember you need to indicate the page number. But anyway, so you start off with the explanation of the personification, and then you need, of course, to quote correctly, and then whether that is then effective or not. The next is I'm quickly going to mute you again.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry.
No, it doesn't matter, but now all of a sudden I can't mute. Can you mute on your
Let
side?
me see if I can mute now. Oh, no. Well, hang on. I'm trying in the wrong place. That's
Okay. Now I have the floor all to myself. I can speak all the time. Sometimes authors convey meaning through implying rather than stating it directly. What is the narrator implying when she says, as yours are now awaiting reconstruction? So obviously she's had breast cancer, lost a breast, or the breast was maimed in her in the effort to do something about it, and that as sorry, and then we get the idea that she has decided against reconstructing her breast. You think you won't bother after all with that final artifice. You have no need now of nipples, either for feeding or for flirting. So that taking leave of a part of her femininity. But the important take-home point here is that one has to read the question in its entirety. Otherwise, you miss out on the guidelines. Then the mark allocation. The mark allocation indicates the time spent on the question. Now, in this case where you have 8 hours, it's not so urgent, but there may be questions. So if you have to write 2 questions for 100 marks, after an hour, you start on the next 50 marks. But the important thing that you need to have a look at now, especially seeing that you specifically sometimes have a problem, that the mark allocation also indicates the length of an answer. So if they allocate out of 30, 20 marks to one question, that specific question should then be 2/3 of the page or whatever the 2/3 of the time, and the length of the answer, because sometimes people do not expand on an argument and they think it's enough to say one thing, and that's not enough. You need to, especially when the instruction verb is to discuss, you need to bring more than one aspect to your answer. Now, in the case of answering the paper, we look at the instruction again, but this time from a different perspective. We also look at the keywords and the scaffolding again, and only then can we compile or compose our draft. And with the essay and the longer type paragraph questions, you shouldn't even attempt it without a draft. But we'll speak about the draft later on. Now, first of all, what is the nature of the writing required? Do they want a full sentence? Will that be enough? And that again, we are guided by the mark allocation. Do they want a paragraph? And then remember last time we spoke, and previously when we spoke about the short stories and about the poetry, we spoke about the specific structure of the paragraph. The first sentence is the topic sentence, and then the rest of the paragraph supports the argument that you make in your first sentence. And that is one thing that I see from first year modules to postgraduate. That's the way that they prefer their academic papers. That's the way they prefer the paragraphs. And it's important that you practice that specific structure. Then with an essay, we have the introduction, and in ENG1501, it is extremely important that the introduction adheres to the conventions of the academic literary essay. And this is particularly true about when they ask for information. How are you going to organize your information? For instance, that question that I had about the two metaphors. Do you have to compare and contrast the two metaphors? Are they in a sequence where you see an intensity in emotion, for instance? I can think about that Men in Chains. I don't think it's a poem that you're doing this year again, but that's an excellent one where you definitely see how there is an intensity in the metaphors that they're using. Or is there a hierarchy in small things? He has several relationships with people, but it's obvious that his relationship with Amuzu, and Gabriel, those relationships are more important than the relationship that he has with his comrade Q and his landlady. So how am I going to organize my information? And the moment that you start thinking in terms of how to organize, your paragraph gets a more logical, stronger structure. In a discussion, there might be in opposition or in contrast. For instance, if we look at small things, the relationship he has with Desiree is different from the relationship he has with Mercedes. But there are also similarities. So how are you going to organize the information? So first of all, what does the instruction require from you? And what is the nature of the writing? And then once I have decided what it should it be a paragraph, an essay, or simply 2 sentences? How am I going to organize that information? Then, when we have the keywords and the scaffolding, we ask ourselves, what are the guidelines? And if we go back to this one, they give you guidelines. They want you to comment on the effectiveness. So obviously, the examiner thinks that this personification plays a certain role. So, and what is the instruction? What is the relationship between the instruction, the keywords, and the guidelines? So the instruction will tell you, for instance, to explain. The keyword will tell you what to explain. And then the guidelines will tell you where to focus your explanation. Now, when you can't not set a draft, Melissa, and you seem to be quite an ambitious student. You know where you want to go and what you want to do. What I would advise you is to practice setting yourself drafts. You can take the activities that they have in 102, tutorial letter 102, and practice setting out drafts, because a draft, set yourself a time limit that you do not spend too much time on the draft, but set out your main ideas in the draft, and you can check whether you have the main ideas, because the main ideas should reflect the keywords. The keywords should be present in your main ideas. Then use a different color pen for your different ideas, because that might help you. And also arrows and circles, use that. Go back and check in this draft. Can I see I have to explain? Do I answer the question why? And as I've said before, don't edit in this process. I made a draft for a workshop yesterday, and all of a sudden I realized I used a verb where I should have used the noun, and being the pain I can be, I scratch out the verb and put in the noun, and then all of a sudden I didn't know what on earth I wanted to do with that noun. So the drafting process, the editing process is different process from constructing your argument. So leave the editing for the end. Do not keep on correcting yourself in the draft. Now I'm afraid you'll have to sit down and take out a pen and paper. If you look at Unit 4, and in the tutorial letter and in the podcasts, they give you the instruction to read the notes on an academic essay in Unit 4 again. Now here is one of my possible exam questions. It's merely to give you an exercise. That's not relevant. One of the ways in which the narrative is told in small things is the ways in which the setting reflects the narrator's mood and attitude. Using the extract below as a starting point, write an essay in which you discuss how the narrator reacts to his environment. Remember to quote from the extract and refer to other sections of the novel to support your argument. And then I took this quote from page 118. My broodings continue at the Nelson Mandela Bridge. Nothing in particular, just a collection of crisscross longings in no particular sequence or setting. I am gnawed by a biting loneliness that I wish at times that I were dead. Now, if here is the structure for the introduction, you have the name and surname of the author, afterwards the surname only. You need to incorporate the name of the text with 2 to 3 lines what the text is about. You need to have a thesis statement. The thesis statement is a statement. If you go back to my example here, this is actually the thesis statement. This is the statement that you have to either agree or disagree with. You have to contextualize the extract, where in the book is it, and indicate the structure that you are going to use in your essay. I am going to give you about 5, 6, 7 minutes to write your extract. That you write your introduction. Sorry, my daughter sent me a difficult WhatsApp. So please take about 5 minutes to write how you are going to write your introduction to your essay in this case. You can ask, I can toggle between the 2 slides. So you can ask me if you want to change one of the slides. Melissa, are you ready to read your introduction? You can unmute yourself.
Yes, well, not quite, but I'm gonna make a try.
Okay.
Okay, so I've said in Ntikeng Mokhlele Small Things, the author makes ample use of the setting to reflect the narrator's mood and attitude. Bear in mind, I haven't yet done my editing, so
Okay, no, that doesn't matter.
taking into account the extract, and then I've put the quote of the page of the extract. The Nelson Mandela Bridge plays a large role in the narrative and is the place at which much of the musing and brooding of the narrator takes place. With the extract as a starting point, I intend to explore in this essay the various settings in which the mood and attitude of the narrator can be contrasted, was the word that I've put in there for the first. And then I said, firstly, I will focus on the narrator's time in prison. And then, okay, so that's where my writing has stopped. But what my thinking was that I would focus on the key settings that have come up throughout the novel. So I thought to look at, I didn't know whether I should deal with the early days before his prison. But I mean, one could deal with Sophia Town, with a prison, maybe with his time with Mercedes, and then his time with Desiree.
Yes. What I want you to think about your what I would like you to do is after the class, it would be a good idea if you go back to this structure and tick off, can you see this and this and this? Can you see everything, because you had the name and surname of the author and you had the name of the text. It's difficult to make sure, but I couldn't hear, I didn't hear an explanation of what the book is about.
Does one explain the entire book, or does one just contextualize the extract? That's what I'm not too sure about.
You do both. What I have done here in Small Things by the unknown narrator's journey from from imprisonment during apartheid to the struggle to survive in a democratic South Africa is narrated through flashbacks, and I thought that would be suffice to actually incorporate this first three.
Okay.
Do you read something like The Guardian is the one I would recommend, but do you ever read reviews of books?
Yes, I do. You've mentioned The Guardian, and I've actually gone onto it and tried to read some reviews there. So yeah, I've enjoyed that.
Yes, and then you'll see that that is more or less the way that they start their reviews.
Okay.
And then your thesis statement, I could hear I could hear.
But there, I basically just repeated what you posed as the question. Is that sufficient?
I would say on a first year level, it would be sufficient. Whether it would give you an 85, I don't know, but at least it will kick you into the 60s.
Okay. We're aiming high.
We're aiming high. But, remember, as you practice this technique, you will be able to build a better thesis statement.
Okay.
then I didn't get to contextualize the extract. What I thought, if you think of it as you only actually have an hour for this kind of essay, I thought to have that, to examine the reflection of the writer's attitude as mirrored by the setting. His description of Sophia Town and his final description of life in the caravan will be contrasted.
Okay.
But you see that you can have maybe a third one, and I think seeing that they have Mandela Bridge, or that I chose Nelson Mandela Bridge as my quote, I think one has to refer to Nelson Mandela Bridge, because in that name we have the struggle against apartheid, but the fact that it's now a bridge is a symbol of the democratic South Africa.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the irony that he actually wishes that he were dead. And at times, he really contemplates committing suicide.
Mm. So what I'm taking from the content is that one must actually narrow it down and try and focus just on 2 or 3 different aspects rather than going broad. I mean, I don't think there's going to be time enough, but
there won't be time. That's why the mark allocation is so important. If they structure the exam as in a third towards a poem, a third towards a short story, and a third towards the essay, you are not really going to have time to actually reflect on more than 2 settings.
yeah. But yeah, then I would definitely think, because part of the feedback on my essay was I did focus on the extract, but not in extreme detail. And I actually think that I could have maybe focused slightly more. So I think
Yes,
one would probably have to then use the Nelson Mandela Bridge as
yes,
certainly one of the settings.
yes. And if you look at, I mean, that the final few chapters of the book is actually in such strong contrast to this specific setting, because in this setting he wishes he were dead, whereas in the final chapter he has made peace with the fact that he is mortal.
Yeah. And maybe in that context, one could use Sophia Town as well as this as a place where he maybe felt immortal at this time.
Yes, and he had this extreme passion for Desiree.
Yeah, so his life was, I mean, that whole section is called Life.
Yeah,
So yeah, if one could maybe contrast, I think the 3 are in 3 different spots. They're in 3
yes,
different parts of the novel. So yeah, in that context, maybe the 3 options would be a
yes,
good. Then leave out the whole Mercedes and how he felt when he was with Desiree. I mean, that's almost a different theme.
yes. So it, but if we go back to this one, what are the guidelines, and is there an underlying argument to discover? And then finally, what is the relationship between the instruction, the keywords, and the guidelines? And that's why I speak about you need to be a conscious reader.
Yeah.
I think what makes ENG1501 difficult in a way is that people have several valid opinions, or several students have several valid opinions. But the problem comes in the formulation. I listened this afternoon to all the podcasts that they've made for the students, and they strongly advise against consulting other material, because if it's your own idea, you will have a better chance of expressing it properly. So if it's your idea to take Mandela Bridge and Sophia Town, and then you will be able to supply the words for it.
Yeah.
Now, with the conclusion. The conclusion is just as important as the sorry, I'm in the wrong one. The conclusion starts off with a transition word to indicate the conclusion. So finally, lastly, in conclusion, then it's very important. If I have said in my introduction here at the structure that I am going to analyze or compare or contrast. Remember, I would have contrasted his experiences in Sophia Town, on Nelson Mandela Bridge, and the end of his final experiences at the caravan. Then that must be reflected in my conclusion. Again, the author, this case the surname only, and the name of the book must be mentioned again.
And can I ask something, Mrs. Talia? They mentioned that if you are, quote, I think they said it in tutorial letter 203 or whatever the one was on the essay, that you only have to refer to the page number throughout.
Yes.
But then once the conclusion comes, then once again you mention the surname.
And the name of the book.
And the name of the book within the conclusion.
Within the conclusion.
Okay.
You can actually, last year I had the ENG1501s for, I think, all in all for 12 sessions in the last semester. So I could really spoon feed them. And you can actually kind of work out an introductory sentence to your conclusion, like finally, the author in the name of the book bring about manages to whatever, but you can actually combine that author and surname only with that transition word to indicate that it's a conclusion.
Okay.
And there must be a clear agreement or disagreement with the thesis statement. But remember, they've change the content of, and that there's a new lecturer or involved here. But what they've given the students previously is they've given them an extract from a review of the book. And the students needed to evaluate the opinion in the review, which I thought was quite a bridge too far for first years. But it doesn't matter if they do something like this or whether they do something else. In this last one, you have to agree or disagree with your thesis statement in your introduction. Are there any questions? We have a few minutes left. Are there any questions? Oh, Natemba, you came in late. You can unmute yourself if you want to. Melissa, any questions?
If it's okay, I'm going to take you up on sending you my essay, but I only want you to look at it if you really have time before you go away.
I will have time. I'm on grandchildren duty this weekend, and they can play around. I mean, it's not as if I have to save you from failure.
No.
So it's merely, yes, it's not as intense as reading something for the first time. I only need to make sure that you understand what the problem was. So no, you can honestly send it.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And then on Monday, you say there will be another class.
I'm going to discuss it with Jock. Maybe we should rather have it on Saturday morning, because during the week the students are writing exams. Do you write exams on Saturday mornings?
Quite a number of them are actually on Saturday. And then, interestingly enough, there was somebody that's a Seventh-day Adventist that said that that's a big problem for her. So, yeah, it seems as though one can't win. So, yeah, I've got two that are being written on Saturday, but only way later in the exam.
Okay.
And then there's one that was meant to go from a Tuesday to a Saturday. And if I hadn't looked on my timetable, it's now going from a Tuesday just to the Wednesday. So, yeah, they changed the time without mentioning it.
Yes, I saw the same kind of thing. Shane Themba says, I can see I missed out a lot. I worked till late today. Ntemba, are you working on Monday as well? You can unmute if you want to and speak up. Because I'll speak to Jock and then I'll simply repeat, because I think the notices didn't go out. There was a mistake, because Melissa, if you so you are working late on Monday as well. Ntemba, the meeting has been recorded, so you can, I'll ask Jacques to upload it kind of immediately. So you can listen to it then if you do not have time. But if you're coming late on Monday as well. But I'll speak to Jacques and ask him, and then we will send out emails tomorrow. Ntemba, do you have any questions? You can really unmute and ask if you want to. Okay, then Demba, you can either listen to the recording or I'll speak to Jock, and then on Monday evening we'll have a repeat of the class. It's no big deal because I have the slides, so it's not a big thing to just have the class again, because I think the students really need some help, and then you are writing on Wednesday. Okay, we've had our hour and a half. Thank you for turning up. And then
Thank you very much.
okay, and then I might see you. It depends. I'll ask Jock to send out the message, and then I'll see you on Monday. Okay. Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
evening. Bye.